My name is Meera, and if you ever saw me walking down the street, you'd probably notice two things: the large book in my hand and the way my hair is always tied into two tight buns, one on either side of my head. It started as a practical habit during college. Now it's become something else, like armor. People remembered me for it. Some laughed. One man, though, made me feel seen because of it. That man was Arman. He wasn't supposed to matter at first. Just another freelance illustrator assigned to the publishing house where I work as a junior editor. He arrived late to our first meeting, carrying a worn leather sketchbook and the faint smell of peppermint. I barely looked up from my notes when he said, "Sorry, I'm late." But those are the most disciplined hair buns I've ever seen. It caught me off guard. I blinked, smiled awkwardly. That's how it began, with a comment no one else would have thought to make. We spent the next few weeks working closely on a children's poetry book. He was brilliant with imagery, quick to sketch a mood, a moment, a metaphor. I was drawn to his ease, the way he inhabited spaces like he belonged without trying. But more than that, it was how he listened. Really listened. During lunch breaks, we talked about everything: nostalgia, failed dreams, our mutual love for Rumi. He started showing me his private sketches, delicate ink drawings of girls with double buns, some peaceful, some wild-eyed, some almost sad. He'd laugh, saying, "They're all versions of you. I just don't know which one's real yet." There was something intoxicating about him. He never asked to touch me, never flirted in any obvious way, but there was an energy, like he was reaching into parts of me I'd carefully hidden. He'd lean close during reviews, his voice low, his breath warm near my ear. "You're the only one who reads with her spine," he once said, watching me correct a draft. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt poetic, and it made me want to hear more. Still, he kept his boundaries vague. No texts outside work hours, no social media presence. Every time I tried to learn more, he deflected with charm. "Let's not ruin the mystery, Meera. That's the whole fun of life." And I let him stay mysterious. One evening, as we walked out of the office together, a chilly breeze caught my hair loose. I reached to fix it, but he gently stopped me. "Don't. It looks better when it's not so guarded." That sentence stayed with me long after he disappeared into the dark parking lot. I stood there, fingers half raised to my head, unsure whether to smile or cry. I didn't know it then, but that moment, those words would be the beginning of everything I'd come to question, including myself. And just like that, I started falling for someone I barely knew. Arman had a way of making silence feel safe. In the weeks that followed, our bond deepened, not through grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but in the quiet corners of ordinary moments. Late nights at the office turned into shared takeout meals, and soon our conversations drifted beyond work and into the crevices of our lives. He started bringing me sketches, not for the book, but for me. One, in particular, stood out. It was a minimalist drawing of a girl sitting cross-legged, her hair styled in two buns like mine, but instead of eyes, the sketch had windows. "You see everything," he told me, "even the things you try not to." No one had ever said something like that to me before. It felt both flattering and unnerving. I was falling, slowly, deliberately, into a space I wasn't sure how to name. Arman never labeled us. We didn't go on dates. We didn't hold hands in public. But when we were alone, it felt like the world was slightly tilted in our favor. He once brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You wear your walls so beautifully, Meera. Two neat buns to guard what you're afraid to let loose." I smiled, unsure whether to feel exposed or understood. Maybe both. But even as our connection grew, so did the distance wrapped in his charm. Arman was elusive. Some weeks, he was warm, affectionate, almost vulnerable. Other times, he vanished. No calls, no messages, only to reappear days later, unfazed. "Sorry, I got caught up in a deadline," he'd say, always with that same effortless grin. He never shared his address. He never introduced me to any friends. Every attempt I made to anchor our connection into something more defined slipped, through his fingers like sand. One night, I worked up the courage to ask him directly, "What are we doing, Armaan?" He looked at me as if amused by the question, then leaned in and whispered, "We're discovering. Not everything needs a name to be real." It sounded poetic, until I sat with it alone. Still, I stayed, because when he was present, it felt like we were writing something beautiful together. He brought me a small envelope one evening, sealed with red wax. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in elegant cursive. "Between your two buns lives the part of you I adore. The part no one else gets to see." My heart soared, foolishly. But the signs were there. Once during a call, I heard a woman's laughter in the background. He said it was his sister. Another time, he canceled on me last minute, claiming a client emergency, yet posted a scenic sunset from a location hours away. I wanted to confront him, but I didn't. Instead, I told myself love meant patience, trust. Maybe he just needed time to open up. Still, a voice in my head whispered something I wasn't ready to hear. Mystery can be a mask, or a mirror, and I was about to find out which one Armaan truly was. It was a Tuesday when the truth began to unravel, not with drama, but with a single misplaced file. I had borrowed Armaan's tablet to review some new illustrations for our upcoming project. He handed it to me casually, saying, "You'll love what I drew last night. It's you, but softer." His grin was as relaxed as always, but when I tapped open his gallery, I accidentally swiped one folder too far. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of another woman. She had long chestnut hair and wore it in two buns almost identical to mine. Her smile was wider, less guarded. In some photos, Armaan stood beside her, arms draped easily over her shoulder. They looked like a couple. No mystery, no spaces between them. My breath caught. Before I could process what I was seeing, Armaan snatched the tablet from my hands. "Wrong folder," he said too quickly, his voice tight. "That was old stuff. Don't overthink it." But I had already seen enough. That woman wasn't just a friend or a former muse. She was clearly someone important, someone he had allowed into his life completely, something he had never done with me. Later that evening, I sat in my apartment with his words ringing in my head. Don't overthink it. That had always been his way, keeping things fluid, ambiguous, as if clarity might dull the sparkle between us. Still, I couldn't let it go, so I searched. With little effort, I found her. Nina, a lifestyle blogger. Her latest post was a glowing celebration of her fiancé, Armaan Malhotra, the same man who told me he didn't believe in labels, who claimed to love mystery, who kissed me last week like I was his beginning and his end. My chest felt hollow. I scrolled further, each caption cutting deeper. He proposed under the banyan tree where we had our first kiss. My forever illustrator who painted me into his life. That's when I understood. I had never been his story. I was just a sketch, a side page in the margins of someone else's masterpiece. The next day at work, he acted as if nothing had changed. "You good?" he asked, offering me coffee like usual. I nodded, lips tight, refusing to meet his eyes. He had betrayed me, not just romantically, but emotionally. He made me believe I was seen, valued, different. And all the while, he was living a parallel life, engaged to a woman who wore my hairstyle, who likely received the same whispered nothings. My hands trembled beneath the desk. Rage, confusion, humiliation, each one crashing into me. But I stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of cold clarity. Armaan had painted a version of me. He could admire, but not keep. And now, I would become something else entirely. Not his muse, not his mystery, but the woman who would finally undo the illusion, and he'd never see it coming. I didn't confront Armaan with screaming or tears. That would have been too easy. For him, another emotion to sketch, another scene to file under inspiration. No, I chose precision, quiet power. The same way he drew his lines. Steady, calculated, controlled. The next morning, I walked into the office with my head held high, my hair twisted into its usual double buns. But this time, they weren't a symbol of order. They were my crown. He noticed, of course. "Back to the buns, I see," he said with a smirk. I gave nothing back. No reaction. No hint of the storm brewing beneath my skin. Over the next week, I distanced myself. I assigned the final review of the book to another editor and avoided all direct interaction with Armand. I could tell he noticed the shift. His glances grew longer, his messages more frequent. "Everything okay?" he asked in one of them. I left it unread. But behind the scenes, I was doing what he never expected, unveiling the man behind the charm. With quiet care, I contacted Nina. It wasn't easy, but I knew she deserved to know. I didn't send proof to shame her. I simply shared the truth. Timestamps, messages, the envelope with his handwriting, and yes, the sketches, ones he claimed were uniquely mine but mirrored hers in eerie detail. Her response was polite at first, doubtful. But then the pieces began to click for her too. "He told me I was the only muse he ever truly had," she wrote, bitterness now curling through her words. By the end of that week, Nina publicly called off their engagement through a cryptic but unmistakable blog post titled, "Not Every Artist Deserves Their Canvas." Her followers, loyal and loud, rallied behind her. The fallout was swift. Armand showed up at my desk the next day, face pale, mask cracking. "What did you do, Meera?" I looked up, steady. I let the truth out, that's all. He sat, for once speechless. The man who always had a line for every situation now couldn't draw a sentence. "I never meant to hurt you," he finally said, eyes pleading. "But you did," I replied calmly. "Not because you didn't mean to, but because you never cared if you did." That silence between us, the one that used to feel safe, now felt like ash. I stood up, brushed past him, and walked away. No tears, no regret, just relief. Weeks passed. Armand left the project. Word spread, softly at first, then louder. His illusion faded. The office no longer whispered about our closeness. They spoke about his carelessness. As for me, I got promoted. But more importantly, I started sketching. Quietly, for myself. Pages filled with images of women with buns. Some broken, some bold. All healing. Because I realized something. He may have gone between both of my buns to try and reach the parts I guarded most. But only I get to decide who stays there.